If love has a price, why are children always the ones forced to pay it? The rain came down so hard that night it blurred the lights outside the Kong estate into trembling streaks of gold. Thunder rolled over the Texas hills as if warning everyone to stay indoors. Yet on the wide stone driveway, 3 tiny cries pierced through the storm. Claire Sutton had only been working at the mansion for 6 weeks. At 26, she had already learned that people rarely noticed the maid carrying laundry baskets or wiping marble floors. Invisible people heard everything, though. They heard arguments behind closed doors. They heard promises broken. They heard doors slam. Earlier that evening, she had heard the mistress shouting, "I'm done pretending this is the life I wanted." The front door exploded open moments later. A luxury SUV sped away into the rain without slowing once. Claire stood frozen beneath the entrance canopy, a basket of folded towels slipping from her hands as something else caught her attention. 3 infants. 3 identical baby carriers sat alone near the front fountain, soaked by the cold rain. For one impossible second, Claire thought someone must be nearby. No one came. Only the babies cried louder. Then headlights appeared. A black pickup truck lost control as it rounded the slick curve leading toward the estate gates. The tires screamed across wet pavement, sliding directly toward the children. Every security guard saw it. Every servant screamed. Nobody moved. Claire did. Without thinking, she sprinted through the rain. Her shoes slipped across the stone, but she kept running. She reached the carriers just as the truck skidded closer. Grabbing one carrier with each hand and hooking the third with her forearm, she threw herself sideways across the soaked grass. The truck crashed into the fountain instead. Stone shattered. Water erupted into the air. Silence lasted only a heartbeat before the babies began crying again. Claire lay motionless, shielding all 3 little bodies beneath her own. One by one, the guards rushed over. "She's breathing. The babies are okay." Someone called for an ambulance. Someone else whispered, "Those are Mr. Kang's triplets." The words barely registered through Claire's fading consciousness. Hours later, Adrian Park stepped off his helicopter onto the estate grounds after a business trip that had ended earlier than expected. The mansion was surrounded by emergency vehicles. Broken marble littered the driveway. Rain still dripped from the ruined fountain. His expression hardened. What happened? No one answered immediately. Finally, the oldest guard lowered his head. "Sir, your wife left." Adrian stared at him. "She abandoned the children." The sentence hung in the cold night air. "And the triplets? They're alive." Relief crossed Adrian's face for only an instant. "How?" The guard turned toward the ambulance parked beneath the mansion lights. There was only one person who ran toward them. Adrian followed his gaze. Inside the ambulance, a young maid rested against a stretcher, her soaked uniform stained with mud, her hands scraped raw, a bandage wrapped around her forehead. Even unconscious, her arms remained folded as though she were still protecting someone. A paramedic gently placed one of the babies into Adrian's arms. To everyone's surprise, the infant immediately began crying. Another nurse tried soothing the second child. Nothing worked. Then Claire stirred weakly. Without opening her eyes, she whispered, "It's okay. I'm here." Almost instantly, all 3 babies became quiet. The ambulance fell completely silent. Adrian looked from the sleeping children to the exhausted woman who had risked everything for lives that were never her responsibility. He had built an empire where loyalty could be bought, fear could be commanded, and enemies could be defeated. But in that single moment, soaked by the remnants of a storm that had nearly stolen his family forever, Adrian realized something no amount of power had ever taught him. The first person to truly protect his children was not their mother. It was the maid no one had ever bothered to notice. Sometimes the people who stay without being asked become more important than the ones who promised never to leave. 3 weeks passed after the storm. The headlines surrounding Adrian Park's missing wife disappeared, almost as quickly as they had appeared, replaced by newer scandals and louder stories. Inside the Park estate, however, nothing felt normal. The mansion remained spotless, the security team doubled their patrols, and expensive toys filled the nursery, yet an emptiness lingered in every hallway. The triplets refused to sleep through the night. Doctors blamed the sudden change in routine. Specialists recommended new feeding schedules. Professional nannies came and left every few days. None of it worked. Whenever one baby started crying, The other two followed within seconds until the nursery echoed with exhausted sobs. Claire Sutton never complained. She arrived before sunrise each morning and quietly took over the nursery after finishing her regular cleaning duties. Nobody had officially assigned her to care for the children, but the house staff had noticed something impossible to explain. The babies settled whenever Claire entered the room. She never rushed. She never raised her voice. She hummed old lullabies her grandmother had taught her as she gently rocked each child, speaking to them as though they could already understand every word. "You're safe. I've got you. You don't have to be afraid anymore." Little by little, the crying stopped. For the first time in days, the nursery became peaceful. Adrian noticed the difference, but said very little. His life had always been governed by discipline, efficiency, and emotional distance. Every employee had a role. Every relationship had boundaries. Claire was simply another member of the household staff, and he intended to keep it that way. One afternoon, he entered the nursery unexpectedly. Claire sat in a rocking chair with one baby asleep against her shoulder while another rested in her lap. The third infant reached toward her face, laughing softly as she smiled back. The room looked less like a mansion nursery and more like an ordinary family home. Adrian stood silently in the doorway. He had never seen his children smile like that. Claire looked up, immediately standing. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize you were here. You don't have to apologize." She carefully handed one of the babies to him. The little boy frowned almost instantly, twisting uncomfortably in Adrian's arms before beginning to cry. Claire hesitated. "May I?" Adrian nodded. The moment she held the baby again, the crying stopped. Neither of them spoke. The silence somehow felt heavier than any conversation. Later that evening, Adrian reviewed the daily reports in his office. Business figures, security updates, financial statements. Everything appeared exactly as expected. Yet one question refused to leave his mind. Why did his own children trust a maid more than their father? The following morning brought another surprise. The estate's elderly housekeeper entered Adrian's office carrying a small notebook. "Sir, I thought you should see this." Inside were handwritten schedules. Every bottle feeding, every medicine, every nap, every doctor appointment, every fever, every diaper change. Each page was filled in Claire's careful handwriting. "She keeps these after finishing all of her assigned duties," the housekeeper explained quietly. No one asked her to. Adrian slowly turned another page. There were notes beside each child's name. Landon prefers sleeping on his left side. Mason smiles whenever music plays. Olivia calms down if someone gently holds her tiny hand. They weren't medical observations. They were the kind of details only someone who truly paid attention would know. For the first time since the night of the accident, Adrian felt something unfamiliar pressing against the walls he had built around himself. It wasn't guilt alone. It was gratitude. Still, pride kept him silent. At dinner, the enormous table remained nearly empty. Adrian ate alone while the triplets slept upstairs. Halfway through the meal, faint crying echoed through the mansion. Before any servant could react, Claire quietly excused herself from the kitchen and hurried upstairs. Within moments, the crying stopped. Adrian set down his fork. He realized he had memorized the sound of peace returning whenever Claire was near. He wasn't ready to admit what that meant. But somewhere deep inside, a truth had already begun to take root. The woman everyone still called the Maid was slowly becoming the one person holding his broken family together. The cruelest wounds are often the ones left by words instead of weapons. By the beginning of autumn, the Park estate had settled into a rhythm that looked peaceful from the outside. Fresh flowers decorated the grand foyer every Monday. Luxury cars arrived and departed through the iron gates with clockwork precision. Executives visited Adrian Park's private office almost daily, discussing investments worth millions of dollars. To outsiders, the mansion looked like the home of a man who had complete control over every part of his life. Only those who lived inside its walls knew otherwise. Every morning, before the sun reached the eastern windows, Claire Sutton quietly walked upstairs carrying 3 warm bottles and a small stuffed elephant each of the triplets had somehow claimed as their favorite. Landon reached for her before opening his eyes. Mason laughed the moment he heard her footsteps. Olivia refused breakfast unless Claire held her hand. It had become routine. Unfortunately, someone else had begun noticing the same thing. During a formal family luncheon, Adrian's older aunt, Victoria Park, arrived with several relatives who rarely visited unless business or inheritance was involved. The elegant dining room filled with polished smiles and carefully chosen compliments. Claire remained invisible, quietly serving coffee behind each chair, until Olivia started crying. The baby reached both tiny arms toward Claire. Without thinking, Claire gently picked her up. Olivia immediately rested her head against Claire's shoulder. Victoria's smile disappeared. "How interesting," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "The maid seems to think she's part of the family." The room became uncomfortably quiet. Claire lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am." "You should be," Victoria replied coldly. "Employees should remember their place." Claire carefully returned Olivia to her high chair. The little girl burst into tears again. Victoria frowned. "You've spoiled these children." Claire remained silent. Adrian watched everything unfold without interrupting. Not because he agreed, because he had spent his entire life believing family disputes were best ignored. The luncheon continued. Yet the comments did not stop. She should be cleaning floors. Children become confused when servants act like mothers. One day she'll expect something in return. Every sentence landed harder than the one before. Claire simply continued serving lunch. That evening she sat alone in the staff courtyard, eating a simple sandwich after everyone else had finished dinner. The estate gardener quietly approached. "You okay?" Claire offered a small smile. "I've heard worse. But it still hurts." She looked toward the illuminated nursery windows. "It doesn't matter what people think about me. What matters?" she answered without hesitation. "The children never wonder whether they're loved." Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Adrian replayed the afternoon in his mind. He had noticed something he could not ignore. Claire had never defended herself. She had never argued. She had never asked for recognition. Even after being humiliated in front of everyone, she had returned to the nursery before anyone else. Later that night, another incident forced Adrian to pay closer attention. Olivia developed a mild fever. The pediatrician assured everyone it was nothing serious, but the little girl refused medicine from every nurse. She turned away from every bottle. She cried whenever anyone else held her. Claire quietly entered the room. "May I try?" The doctor nodded. Claire wrapped Olivia in a soft blanket and whispered gently into her ear. Within seconds, the little girl opened her mouth for the medicine. The room fell silent. "How did you do that?" one nurse asked. Claire smiled softly. "She trusts my voice." Adrian stood by the nursery door watching the scene. For the first time, he realized trust could never be purchased. It had to be earned one ordinary moment at a time. The following afternoon, another surprise arrived. Security cameras captured Landon taking his first unsteady steps. He ignored every expensive toy placed around him. Instead, he crossed the nursery on shaky little legs until he reached Claire, wrapping both tiny arms around her knees. The staff applauded. Claire wiped away tears she tried to hide. Adrian watched the recording. Alone that evening, his son had taken his first steps. Not toward him, toward the woman everyone insisted was just the maid. He closed the video without saying a word. For years he had built an empire where respect came from power and obedience came from fear. Yet inside his own home, 3 small children had chosen someone for an entirely different reason. She made them feel safe. And despite everything his relatives believed about status, wealth, and bloodlines, Adrian could no longer deny the truth growing clearer with every passing day. The person holding his children's hearts was not the one who had given birth to them. It was the woman everyone else still refused to see. Sometimes the truth hides in the smallest details, the ones everyone else walks past. Winter arrived quietly, wrapping the Park estate in cold mornings and silver skies. The gardens stood perfectly trimmed, fountains continued to flow, and every employee performed their duties with practiced precision. From a distance, the mansion still looked untouchable. Inside, however, Adrian Park had begun noticing things he had never noticed before. Not the million-dollar artwork hanging in the hallways. Not the endless security reports stacked on his desk. He noticed Claire. He noticed that she was always the first person awake. He noticed that she never sat down until everyone else had finished eating. He noticed that she always smiled at the triplets before she smiled at anyone else. One morning Adrian left his office earlier than usual. Passing through the kitchen, he found Claire preparing breakfast bottles while quietly reading handwritten notes beside each child's name. She measured every ounce carefully. She checked the temperature twice. She marked each feeding time in a notebook already filled with months of observations. You keep records every day? Adrian asked. Claire looked surprised to see him. Yes, sir. No one instructed you to. No, then why? She paused before answering. Children can't tell us what's wrong. The least I can do is pay attention. Her answer stayed with Adrian long after he walked away. Later that afternoon, he visited the nursery alone. Curiosity led him to the bookshelf beside Claire's rocking chair. There he found several worn notebooks. At first he assumed they contained schedules. Instead, every page held something far more personal. Landon laughed for the first time after hearing rain. Mason falls asleep faster when soft piano music is playing. Olivia smiles whenever someone says her name before picking her up. Each page documented tiny milestones. Every first laugh, every restless night, every fever that finally broke, every new tooth, every successful doctor's visit. There was even a page titled Things They Love. His chest tightened. No photograph in his office contained as much love as those simple handwritten pages. He slowly turned another page. If they ever wonder whether someone stayed, I hope they'll know they were never alone. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. Adrian quietly closed the notebook. That evening he reviewed security footage from previous months. Frame after frame revealed moments he had never witnessed. Claire carrying sleeping babies after finishing her cleaning shift. Claire remaining awake beside a crib until sunrise during Olivia's fever. Claire reading children's books while folding laundry. Claire skipping her own lunch because Mason refused to eat unless she stayed beside him. None of those moments had ever appeared in the daily reports delivered to his office. Yet they told him more about his own family than any report ever had. The following week, another discovery surprised him even more. During a routine accounting review, Adrian noticed repeated payments from Claire's modest salary to a nearby children's hospital. He asked the estate accountant, "Does she have relatives there?" The accountant shook his head. "No, sir." "Then who receives the donations?" "We asked once. And she simply said someone helped her years ago. She promised herself she'd help other children whenever she could." Adrian leaned back silently. The woman earning the smallest paycheck in his household was quietly giving part of it away every month. Without recognition, without publicity, without expecting anything in return. For the first time in years, Adrian questioned his own judgment. He had always believed character revealed itself during negotiations, crises, and difficult decisions. Claire revealed hers during ordinary days that nobody else noticed. That realization became impossible to ignore a few nights later. Olivia woke crying after a nightmare. Claire rushed into the nursery before anyone called for her. She gently lifted the little girl into her arms and whispered, "Bad dreams can't stay where love lives." Half asleep, Olivia wrapped both arms around Claire's neck. Then she murmured a single word. "Mom." Claire froze. Her eyes filled with tears. "No, sweetheart," she whispered gently. "Go back to sleep." Standing outside the nursery door, Adrian heard everything. Claire never corrected the child to benefit herself. She never encouraged the misunderstanding. Instead, she quietly protected Olivia's feelings while asking for nothing. For several long moments, Adrian remained motionless in the hallway. The notebooks, the sleepless nights, the hospital donations, the patients, the sacrifices. Each memory connected with the next until a truth became impossible to deny. He had spent months believing Claire was helping because it was her job. Now he understood something far more profound. No job description could explain that kind of devotion. Only love could. The people who disappear often return only after they hear someone else has rebuilt what they left behind. Spring brought warmth back to the Park estate. The triplets had begun taking their first confident steps across the nursery, laughing as they chased one another between oversized stuffed animals and colorful building blocks. Their laughter filled rooms that had once echoed with silence. For the first time in nearly a year, Adrian believed his home was finally healing. Then the black sedan arrived. It rolled slowly through the front gates just before noon, stopping at the circular driveway beneath the mansion entrance. Every security officer recognized the woman before she stepped outside. Sophia Park, the children's mother. She wore an expensive cream-colored suit, oversized sunglasses, and a smile polished for cameras rather than family. Behind her stood two attorneys carrying leather briefcases and a woman introducing herself as a public relations consultant. Claire watched quietly from an upstairs hallway. She immediately understood this visit had nothing to do with love. Adrian met Sophia in the grand foyer. "You're back," he said calmly. "I came for my children. You've been gone 11 months. I needed time. You never called. I wasn't ready." Adrian looked at her without anger, only disappointment. Sophia removed her sunglasses. "I've changed." Before Adrian could answer, the sound of tiny footsteps echoed across the marble floor. The triplets had escaped the nursery. Landon, Mason, and Olivia stopped several feet away, staring curiously at the unfamiliar woman. Sophia smiled brightly. "My babies." She knelt with open arms. None of the children moved. Instead, Olivia turned around and ran toward Claire, who had just reached the bottom of the staircase. Within seconds, both boys followed. Claire instinctively picked Olivia up while the twins clung to either side of her skirt. The silence that followed was impossible to ignore. Sophia's smile slowly disappeared. Why are they hiding behind her? No one answered. Even the attorneys exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sophia stood. "This is exactly what I expected." She pointed directly at Claire. "You've turned my children against me." Claire immediately shook her head. "I would never do that." "Oh, please." Sophia laughed bitterly. "You're just the maid. I've never claimed to be anything else." "Then stop acting like their mother." The words echoed throughout the foyer. Claire lowered her eyes. "I've only tried to make sure they felt safe. That wasn't your place." Before Claire could respond, Olivia buried her face against Claire's shoulder, refusing to look at her biological mother. Sophia noticed. Her expression hardened. This woman has manipulated them. Adrian finally spoke. "Enough." His voice remained calm, but unmistakably firm. "They're frightened. They're confused because she's replaced me." "No," Adrian answered quietly. "They're confused because someone they loved disappeared." The conversation ended there. But the conflict had only begun. Within 48 hours, entertainment websites published headlines questioning Claire's intentions. Anonymous sources claimed the maid was trying to secure a wealthy future. Television commentators debated whether household employees should become emotionally attached to employers' children. Photographers waited outside the estate gates. Claire became the center of a story she had never wanted. She stopped walking through the front entrance. She avoided grocery stores. She ignored every headline. Her only concern remained upstairs in the nursery. One evening, Adrian found her sitting alone after the children had fallen asleep. A newspaper rested unopened beside her. "You haven't looked at it," Adrian observed. "I don't need to." "Aren't you curious what they're saying?" Claire smiled sadly. "They don't know me." She looked through the nursery window where the triplets slept peacefully. "If I spend my time defending myself to strangers, I'll have less time loving the children." Her answer lingered in Adrian's mind long after he returned to his office. Meanwhile, Sophia prepared for court. She filed a petition requesting immediate custody of the triplets. Her legal team argued that Claire had deliberately interfered with the children's emotional development. She demanded Claire be removed from the estate before the custody hearing. When the documents arrived, the mansion fell silent. Several employees feared Claire would be dismissed immediately. Instead, Adrian carefully placed the legal papers back into their envelope. He looked toward the nursery door. For months, he had watched Claire sacrifice sleep, comfort, and recognition without asking for anything in return. Now someone was asking him to send her away. He finally understood that the next decision would not simply determine who remained employed inside his household. It would determine whether he had the courage to stand beside the one person who had never stopped standing beside his children. The strongest promise is the one made without speaking a single word. The legal battle changed the atmosphere inside the Park estate almost overnight. Security officers spoke more quietly. Household employees avoided discussing the custody case in the hallways. Every morning, television vans parked outside the front gate, hoping to capture a glimpse of the woman now described by the media as the mysterious maid. Claire ignored them all. Her routine never changed. She still woke before dawn. She still prepared breakfast for the triplets. She still read stories before their afternoon naps. If anything, she smiled more often around the children, determined that they would never feel the tension surrounding them. Adrian noticed. One evening, he entered the nursery after another exhausting meeting with his attorneys. Claire was helping the triplets stack colorful wooden blocks into a tower. The children laughed every time it collapsed. For several minutes, Adrian simply watched. It had been months since he had heard carefree laughter inside the mansion. "May I join?" he asked. The room became quiet. Claire looked surprised. "Of course, sir." Adrian sat on the carpet for the first time in years. Landon immediately handed him a wooden block. Mason clapped excitedly. Olivia carefully placed another block on top before the tower tumbled once again. The four of them laughed together. Claire quietly stepped back, allowing Adrian to enjoy the moment. He noticed, "You don't have to leave. I thought they deserved time with their father. They deserve you here too." The words surprised both of them. Neither spoke for several seconds. Later that night, Adrian met privately with his legal team. "I want every security recording from the last 12 months. His attorney looked confused. "For the custody hearing?" "Yes. There are thousands of hours. Review all of them." Within days, the investigation uncovered something no one had expected. Camera after camera showed Claire caring for the triplets long after her scheduled shift had ended. She stayed during storms. She stayed during power outages. She stayed when the children were sick. She stayed on holidays when other employees returned home to their families. The footage also revealed something else. Sophia had not merely left. She had ignored repeated messages from the estate asking her to return after the children became ill. Phone records confirmed missed calls. Emails remained unopened. Travel records showed luxury vacations while the triplets spent nights in the pediatric ward. Adrian stared silently at the evidence spread across the conference table. Every document erased another excuse he had once made for his wife. Every recording revealed another sacrifice Claire had quietly carried alone. His attorney finally broke the silence. "Mr. Park, these records will significantly strengthen your case." Adrian nodded. "But I don't want this to be about winning." "What do you mean?" "I want the truth." That same afternoon, Claire was organizing the nursery when Adrian entered carrying a small cardboard box. "I found these." He placed the box on the table. Inside were dozens of crayon drawings, tiny handprints, birthday decorations carefully folded and labeled, cards reading, "First smile, first steps, and first Christmas together." Claire looked embarrassed. "I was going to give them to the children when they're older. You saved everything. I thought one day they'd want to remember." Adrian picked up a handmade card. On the back, Claire had written a single sentence. "Every child deserves proof that someone celebrated their smallest victories." He slowly folded the card closed. "You never expected anyone to read these, did you?" She shook her head. "They weren't for me." Before he realized what he was doing, Adrian reached out and gently placed the box back into her hands. "Thank you." Claire looked at him in surprise. "For what?" "For giving my children memories I didn't know they had." Her eyes softened. "They gave me just as much." The gratitude in Adrian's voice was genuine. It carried no obligation, no authority, only honesty. As he left the nursery, he understood something that had taken nearly a year to learn. Love wasn't measured by biology. It wasn't defined by legal documents. It revealed itself through ordinary choices repeated every single day. And if anyone questioned who had truly stood beside his children during the darkest season of their lives, Adrian finally knew he would never remain silent again. Love reveals itself most clearly in the moment someone chooses another person's life over their own comfort. The custody hearing was only 4 days away. Every room inside the Park estate carried an unusual stillness, as though the entire house understood that a single decision could change everything. Claire tried not to think about it. She focused on ordinary things instead. Breakfast at 7. Story time before lunch. A walk through the garden if the weather allowed. The triplets deserved normal childhood memories, even while the adults around them prepared for conflict. On Thursday afternoon, Adrian received an urgent phone call that forced him into the city for an unexpected meeting. "I'll be back before dinner," he assured Claire. She smiled. "The children and I will be waiting." The afternoon passed peacefully. Landon chased butterflies across the back lawn. Mason insisted on carrying a tiny red toy truck everywhere he went. Olivia carefully collected yellow flowers for a vase she insisted belonged in the nursery. The estate felt almost peaceful. Then everything changed. A delivery van approached the front security gate. The driver claimed to be transporting custom furniture ordered weeks earlier. Because the delivery matched an existing invoice, the gate opened. The van rolled slowly toward the service entrance. Claire was helping the children feed ducks near the garden pond when she noticed something unusual. The driver never looked toward the loading dock. Instead, He kept watching the children. Every instinct inside her tightened. She gathered the triplets closer. Let's go back inside. The children obediently followed. Before they reached the patio doors, two unfamiliar men stepped from the side of the van. Neither carried furniture. One spoke quietly into a phone. The other moved directly toward the garden path. Claire's heartbeat quickened. She didn't wait to ask questions. Run to the house, she told the children. The triplets froze in confusion. Claire knelt beside them. Remember our game? All three nodded. When I count to 3, you run to Mr. Lewis. Mr. Lewis was the head of estate security standing near the terrace. 1. The men began walking faster. 2. Claire stepped between them and the children. 3. The triplets ran. Claire remained exactly where she was. The strangers realized their opportunity was disappearing. One lunged toward the children. Claire reacted instantly. She shoved a heavy garden bench sideways, forcing the man to stumble long enough for the security team to react. Alarms echoed across the estate. Officers rushed toward the garden from every direction. Within seconds, the intruders abandoned their attempt and fled toward the waiting van. The vehicle sped through the open gates before police units arrived. Silence slowly returned. Landon was crying. Mason refused to let go of Claire's hand. Olivia buried her face against Claire's shoulder, trembling. Claire held all 3 children tightly until their breathing finally slowed. When Adrian returned 30 minutes later, flashing emergency lights still reflected across the mansion walls. He ran toward the garden. Are they all right? Mr. Lewis nodded. Yes, sir. And Claire? The security chief looked toward the nursery windows. She protected them again. Security footage later revealed every second of the incident. The recordings showed Claire stepping directly into danger without hesitation. Not once had she tried to protect herself first. Not once had she looked for an escape. Her only concern had been creating enough time for the children to reach safety. Investigators eventually determined the attempted intrusion had been orchestrated by individuals hoping to exploit the family's highly public custody dispute. No child had been physically harmed, but the emotional impact lingered. That night, the triplets refused to sleep unless Claire remained beside them. Adrian quietly entered the nursery after midnight. Claire sat in the rocking chair with Olivia asleep against her shoulder while the 2 boys rested nearby. She looked exhausted. You should get some rest, Adrian said softly. So should you. Instead of leaving, Adrian sat beside her. After several silent minutes, he finally spoke. I watched the security footage. Claire lowered her eyes. I only did what anyone would have done. He gently shook his head. No, she looked at him. Not everyone would. The room fell. Silent again. Adrian looked toward his sleeping children. He thought about the rainstorm nearly a year earlier. The sleepless nights. The notebooks. The accusations. The custody battle. And now today, every defining moment in his children's lives carried the same constant presence. Claire. For months he had searched for proof that he could trust her. Now he understood the truth. She had never been asking for a place in his family. She had earned one long before he realized it. As the nursery lamp cast a warm glow across the sleeping triplets, Adrian made a quiet promise to himself. No matter what happened in court, no matter how difficult the days ahead became, he would never again allow the woman who had protected his children time and time again to stand alone. The truth does not become powerful because it is spoken loudly. It becomes powerful because it can no longer be denied. The courthouse was already surrounded by reporters before sunrise. Satellite trucks lined the sidewalks. Camera crews waited behind metal barricades. For nearly 2 weeks, the custody dispute involving Adrian Park, his estranged wife Sophia, and the unnamed housemaid had become one of the city's most discussed stories. Most people believed they already knew the ending. Few of them knew the facts. Claire stepped out of Adrian's car, wearing a simple navy dress that she had borrowed from the estate's housekeeper. She wore no jewelry, no expensive handbag, no makeup beyond what she normally applied. She looked exactly like herself. That was enough. Inside the courtroom, Sophia entered confidently with her legal team. Every movement suggested certainty. She smiled politely toward the judge before taking her seat. Claire quietly sat several rows behind Adrian, hoping she would not be called to testify at all. The hearing began with familiar arguments. Sophia's attorneys emphasized biological motherhood. They argued that temporary absence should not permanently separate a parent from her children. They questioned whether an employee had crossed emotional boundaries. Then one attorney turned toward Claire. "Miss Sutton, isn't it true that the children call you their mother?" Claire answered honestly, "No, they've never used that word." "They have. So you encouraged it?" "No, what did you tell them?" Claire looked directly at the judge before answering. "I told them they already had a mother." The courtroom became noticeably quieter. The attorney paused. "You corrected them?" "Yes. Every time. Yes. No matter how much it hurt." Claire smiled gently. "It wasn't about me." Adrian lowered his eyes. For months, he had wondered what had happened during the quiet moments he never witnessed. Now he knew. Claire had protected Sophia's place in the children's hearts even after Sophia had abandoned them. The judge requested evidence. Adrian's legal team began presenting documents. Security footage from the night of the storm. Medical records showing Claire remained with the children throughout every hospital visit. Attendance logs documenting hundreds of additional hours she volunteered without compensation. Photographs of birthdays. Handwritten journals recording developmental milestones. None of it had been prepared for court. It had simply been part of Claire's daily life. Then came the final evidence. Telephone records, emails, travel confirmations. Together they established a clear timeline showing repeated attempts to contact Sophia after she had left the estate. She had ignored every request to return. Sophia's confident expression slowly disappeared. Her attorney requested a brief recess. The judge declined. "What explanation do you offer for these records?" Sophia hesitated. For the first time, she had no prepared answer. "I needed space." The judge remained silent. "So you chose your own comfort over 3 infants?" No response came. Across the courtroom, several reporters quietly lowered their pens. The story they had expected was no longer the story unfolding before them. One final witness entered. Mr. Lewis. The estate's head of security calmly described the attempted intrusion weeks earlier. He played surveillance footage showing Claire stepping between strangers and the children without hesitation. The video ended with Claire shielding the triplets as security officers rushed toward them. Nobody in the courtroom spoke. The silence carried more weight than applause ever could. When the judge invited Adrian to make a closing statement, he stood slowly. He looked first at the children seated in the family room beyond the courtroom, then at Claire, finally toward the bench. "This case began as a dispute over legal custody," he said. "But somewhere along the way, I realized it was really about responsibility." He paused. "Parenthood is not measured by promises made on a wedding day. It is measured by who stays when life becomes difficult." He turned briefly toward Claire. "For nearly a year, one person remained beside my children every single day. She expected nothing. She asked for nothing. She simply loved them." His voice remained steady. "I cannot change the mistakes I made. I cannot erase the months I spent believing that gratitude could wait. But I can tell the truth today." He looked directly at the judge. "My children are alive, healthy, and emotionally secure because Claire Sutton chose them over herself again and again." Across the room, Claire quietly wiped away a tear. She had never wanted recognition. She had only wanted the children to be safe. The judge announced that a written decision would follow after reviewing the complete record. As everyone began leaving the courtroom, reporters rushed toward the exits. This time, however, no one called Claire an opportunist. No one questioned her intentions. The headlines had changed before a single article had even been written. The woman who had entered the courthouse as an anonymous maid walked out as someone whose character had spoken louder than every accusation ever made against her. A family is not defined by who gives you life. It is defined by who chooses to stand beside you every single day. 2 weeks after the hearing, the Park estate felt strangely quiet. The television vans were gone. The reporters had moved on to newer stories. The gates no longer attracted curious strangers. Inside the mansion, however, everyone waited for one final decision. Claire continued living exactly as she always had. She prepared breakfast for the triplets. She helped Landon build towers from wooden blocks. She laughed when Mason insisted every toy dinosaur needed its own blanket. She braided Olivia's hair each morning before reading another story. She never asked Adrian whether the judge had reached a decision. She believed some answers arrived only when they were ready. On a bright Friday morning, Adrian's attorney pulled into the circular driveway. He stepped out carrying a single envelope. No one spoke as Adrian opened it. His eyes moved slowly across the pages. Then, for the first time in many months, he smiled. The court had awarded him full legal custody of the triplets. Sophia would receive supervised visitation after completing the conditions ordered by the court. The ruling also included an unusual observation from the judge. The written decision praised Claire Sutton for her extraordinary dedication to the children's emotional and physical well-being, noting that her actions had consistently reflected compassion, stability, and selfless care. Claire quietly lowered the document after reading those words. "I never expected this." "You never asked for it," Adrian replied. "That makes it mean even more." Life gradually returned to normal. The triplets celebrated another birthday, surrounded by laughter instead of uncertainty. The nursery walls were repainted with bright colors chosen by the children themselves. Family photographs slowly replaced expensive artwork along one hallway. Most of the pictures featured ordinary moments. Baking cookies, playing in the garden, reading bedtime stories. None of them looked perfect. All of them looked real. One evening, Adrian walked through the estate library carrying a small wooden box. He placed it on the table in front of Claire. "I believe these belong to you." She opened the lid. Inside were the journals she had kept since the triplets were infants. "I thought they should stay with the children," she said softly. "They will." Adrian smiled. "But I think their author should keep them until she's ready to pass them on." Claire gently ran her fingers across the worn covers. "I only wanted them to know they were loved. They already do." Several days later, Adrian invited the household staff, close friends, and a handful of business associates to a small celebration in the estate garden. Most assumed it was simply another birthday gathering. No one expected anything more. As the evening sunlight faded into shades of gold, Adrian stood beneath an old oak tree. The triplets raced through the grass, laughing louder than the music playing softly nearby. Adrian looked toward Claire. "Would you come here for a moment?" Confused, she walked over. He took a slow breath. "A year ago, I believed strength meant protecting everyone by myself." He looked toward the children. "They taught me I was wrong." Then he looked back at Claire. "You never asked me for gratitude. You never asked me for recognition. You never asked me for a place in our lives." He reached into his jacket pocket. Instead of a speech prepared by lawyers or advisors, he spoke only from his heart. "You simply stayed." He knelt on one knee. Claire covered her mouth in complete surprise. "I cannot change the day we met. I cannot erase the pain you carried before coming here. But I can choose every day that comes next." He opened the small velvet box. "Claire Sutton, will you build the future of this family with me?" Tears filled her eyes before any words came. The triplets ran toward them. Olivia wrapped both arms around Claire's waist. Landon looked curiously at the ring. Mason smiled. "Say yes." Laughter echoed across the garden. Claire looked at the three children who had unknowingly changed her life just as much as she had changed theirs. Then she looked back at Adrian. "Yes." The answer was quiet. It did not need to be louder. The children cheered anyway. Months later, another photograph joined the hallway wall. It showed 5 smiling faces standing beneath the same oak tree. No titles, no wealth, no headlines. Only a father, a mother by choice, and 3 children who had finally found the peace they deserved. Because in the end, the greatest rescue had not happened on the night of the storm. It happened every ordinary day afterward, when 5 broken hearts slowly chose one another until they became a family.